Mahawit. While I was unconscious on an operating table having my hip replaced, my son David was in my home, forging my signature on documents to steal everything I'd built over 45 years. $2 million in real estate, gone. My retirement fund, drained. He even convinced my tenants I had dementia while planning to lock me in a nursing home and disappear to Costa Rica with his mistress. But what David didn't know was that I'd installed security cameras that uploaded everything to the cloud. When I discovered his betrayal, I didn't call the police, not yet. Instead, I set a trap that would destroy him the same way he tried to destroy me. He thought I was just a helpless old man. He was about to learn why I'd survived 45 years in the construction business. This is the story of how I brought down my own son and exposed a fraud scheme that had destroyed 6 other families before he got to me. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. My name is Frank Morrison, and at 72 years old, I thought I'd seen everything the construction business could throw at a man. 45 years of building homes in Phoenix, Arizona had taught me about foundation cracks, corrupt inspectors, and clients who disappeared when payment was due. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the betrayal that would come from my own flesh and blood. It was a Tuesday morning in March when everything started to unravel. I was sitting in my home office, still moving slowly from the hip replacement surgery I'd had 3 months earlier. The morning sun cast long shadows across my desk as I sorted through the mail my son David had been collecting for me during my recovery. He'd been so helpful, so attentive, driving me to physical therapy, managing my real estate properties, handling the paperwork I couldn't deal with while on pain medication. "Dad, you just focus on getting better," he'd said with that warm smile that reminded me of his late mother. "I've got everything under control." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? This was my boy, the one I'd taught to swing a hammer when he was 8, the one who'd worked summers with me on job sites to pay for college, the one who knew that my real estate portfolio, 6 rental properties accumulated over decades of hard work, was my legacy, my gift to him and his 2 sisters. That morning, I was finally feeling clear-headed enough to review my investment accounts and property statements. The morphine fog had lifted, and I wanted to see how my tenants were doing, check if any maintenance issues had come up. I opened my laptop, squinting at the screen as I logged into my property management portal. The first thing I noticed was that the Camelback property wasn't listed. I refreshed the page, thinking it was a glitch. The 2-bedroom ranch house on Camelback Road had been my first investment property, purchased in 1987 when the area was still underdeveloped. Now it was worth at least $400,000, but it wasn't showing up in my portfolio. My hands started to tremble, and not from the surgery recovery. I clicked through to the Madison Avenue duplex, another property I'd bought in the 90s. Gone. Just gone. Like it had never existed. "This can't be right," I muttered, my voice echoing in the empty house. David had left an hour earlier, saying he had a business trip to prepare for. My daughter Sarah lived in Boston with her family, and Emma, my youngest, was stationed overseas with the Air Force. I pulled out my phone and called the property management company. My heart was racing as the phone rang, each tone feeling like a hammer blow to my chest. "Desert Sun Properties. This is Jennifer." "Jennifer, it's Frank Morrison. I'm looking at my online portal, and I can't see 2 of my properties, the Camelback house and the Madison duplex. Is there something wrong with your system?" There was a pause. I could hear her typing. "Mr. Morrison, I show here that both properties were removed from our management services in January. Your son David handled the paperwork. He said you were selling them as part of estate planning." The room seemed to spin. I gripped the edge of my desk, my knuckles turning white. Selling them? I never authorized any sale. I was in the hospital in January. I have the termination documents here, Mr. Morrison. They have your signature. Send them to me. Now." My voice came out harder than I'd used in years, the foreman's bark that used to silence a construction site. As I waited for the email, my mind raced through the possibilities. Maybe David had made some kind of mistake. Maybe he'd moved them to a different management company for a better rate. Maybe. But even as I thought it, I knew I was grasping at straws. The email arrived with a soft ping. I opened the attachments with shaking fingers. There it was, my signature on documents dated January 15th. The same day I'd been having my hip replaced, drugged unconscious on an operating table at Phoenix General. The signature was perfect. Too perfect. I'd signed enough contracts in my life to know when something was off, but it was the second attachment that made my blood run cold. A deed transfer. The Camelback property had been sold to Desert Rose LLC for $180,000, less than half its market value. The Madison duplex went for $195,000. Combined, my son had stolen nearly $800,000 worth of real estate from his own father. I sat back in my chair, the leather creaking under my weight. The room felt too quiet, too still. Above my desk hung a photo from David's college graduation. Me, him, and his mother, all smiling in the bright California sun. She'd died 5 years later from cancer, and I'd promised her I'd take care of our children, make sure they were set for life. The trust fund I'd set up, the properties that would generate income for generations, the inheritance that would give them security, it was all meant to be divided equally among the three of them when I was gone. But David hadn't wanted to wait. I pulled up my banking app next, my stomach churning with each tap on the keyboard. The mortgage on my own home, paid off for 10 years, now showed a balance. A home equity line of credit had been opened in January, with $200,000 drawn against it. The signature on those documents would be mine too, I was sure of it. My son, my firstborn, had been systematically robbing me while I lay helpless in a hospital bed, while he smiled and held my hand and told me everything would be okay. I sat in that chair for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The grandfather clock in the hallway, another thing my wife had loved, ticked steadily, marking time I couldn't get back. My hip throbbed, reminding me of my vulnerability, of how easy it had been for David to take advantage of me. But I wasn't some helpless old man. I'd built my business from nothing, survived the 2008 housing crash when contractors were going bankrupt left and right. I'd negotiated with mob-connected unions in the 80s and won. If my son thought he could steal my legacy and walk away clean, he'd forgotten who taught him everything he knew. First things first, I needed information. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Marcus Webb. Marcus had been my foreman for 20 years before starting his own property investment company. More importantly, his nephew worked at the county recorder's office. "Frank, how's the hip treating you, old-timer?" Marcus's booming voice filled my ear. "Marcus, I need a favor. No questions asked, and I need it fast." His tone shifted immediately. In construction, when someone like me called in a favor, you didn't joke around. "What do you need?" "I need you to have your nephew pull everything filed at the recorder's office under my name or David's name since January. Every deed, every transfer, every document. Can you do that?" "Give me 2 hours." That was Marcus. No questions, just action. While I waited, I made a list. Every property I owned, every account I had, every asset that could be liquidated. My hands had steadied now, the shock replaced by the cold focus I used to feel when a project was going sideways and I had to fix it fast. The doorbell rang, jolting me from my planning. I grabbed my cane, another reminder of my recent weakness, and made my way to the door. Through the peephole, I saw Eddie Ramirez, one of my tenants from the Central Avenue apartment complex. "Mr. Morrison," Eddie's face lit up when I opened the door. "I've been trying to reach you for weeks. That new property management company your son hired, they're trying to evict everyone. They say the building's being demolished for condos." My blood turned to ice. The Central Avenue complex was my crown jewel. 12 units in an up-and-coming neighborhood, worth at least $2 million. "What new company, Eddie?" "Desert Rose LLC. They sent notices last month saying we had 60 days to vacate. But Mr. Morrison, my lease doesn't expire until December. None of ours do. Desert Rose LLC, the same company that bought my other properties." I gripped the doorframe to keep from swaying. "Eddie, don't worry about the eviction. You're not going anywhere. Give me a few days to sort this out." After Eddie left, I called my daughter Sarah in Boston. I needed to move fast, but I also needed to be smart. David couldn't know I was onto him yet. "Dad, how are you feeling? David said you were doing much better." Sarah, sweetheart, I need you to listen carefully and not react emotionally to what I'm about to tell you. I explained everything I'd discovered, keeping my voice steady even as I heard her gasp. Oh my God, Dad. Are you sure? Maybe there's an explanation. The signatures were forged while I was under anesthesia, Sarah. Your brother has stolen close to $1 million from your inheritance, yours and Emma's. Silence. Then, what do you need me to do? That's my girl. Practical, just like her mother. I need you to call David. Tell him you're planning a surprise visit for my birthday next month. See what he says. If he's planning to run with the money, he'll try to discourage you from coming. Dad, should we call the police? Not yet. I want to know exactly how deep this goes first. And Sarah? Don't tell Emma yet. She's got enough to worry about overseas. Marcus called back as promised. What he told me made me sink into my recliner, the weight of betrayal crushing my chest. David had filed paperwork for 4 of my 6 properties. The 2 he hadn't touched yet were tied up in a trust fund that required all 3 children's signatures. He must have been planning to forge those too. But here was the interesting part. The sales weren't complete yet. Desert Rose LLC was a shell company, and according to Marcus's nephew, the actual transfer of funds was scheduled for next week. David must have been waiting until he thought I was fully recovered and less likely to scrutinize old paperwork. Frank, there's something else, Marcus said, his voice uncomfortable. Desert Rose LLC. The registered agent is a woman named Melissa Summers. Well, my nephew says she's been seen around town with David. A lot. Melissa Summers. Not a name I recognized. David had been married to Patricia for 8 years, and they had 2 kids. My grandchildren. The betrayal kept getting deeper, like discovering rot in a foundation that spread further than you ever imagined. I hung up and sat in the gathering darkness of my office. The house felt different now, violated somehow. Every corner held a memory of David growing up. The doorframe where I'd marked his height, the wall he'd helped me repair when he was 15, the kitchen where he'd told me he was getting married. I thought about calling Patricia, but what would I say? Your husband is stealing from his family and possibly having an affair. No, I needed proof. Real, undeniable proof. That's when I remembered the security cameras. When I'd updated my home security system last year, the technician had thrown in a cloud storage feature. Everything backs up automatically, Mr. Morrison. Even if someone deletes the local files, you've got copies in the cloud for 90 days. David had been in my office multiple times during my recovery. If he'd been practicing my signature, if he'd been going through my files, if he'd been making calls about the properties, it would all be there. I pulled up the security app on my phone, my heart pounding as I scrolled back to January. There he was, the day after my surgery, sitting at my desk with my checkbook, my property files spread out in front of him. In another video, he was on the phone, and I could read his lips. My father won't be a problem. He's heavily sedated. But the video that broke my heart was from February. David was in my office with a woman, young, blonde, laughing as she sat on my desk while he showed her property listings on my computer. They kissed, long and deep, right there in the office where I'd built my business, where his mother had helped me with the books when we were just starting out. You're brilliant, baby, the woman said, her voice just audible. By the time your dad figures anything out, we'll be in Costa Rica. Costa Rica. So that was the plan. Steal everything he could, abandon his family, and disappear. The business trip he'd mentioned this morning. Was that when he planned to run? I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw David as a boy, riding on my shoulders at the state fair, his little hands gripping my hair as he laughed at the fireworks. Then I'd see him at my desk, forging my signature with the same hands, planning to leave me with nothing. By dawn, I had a plan. It wasn't enough to just stop him. I needed to expose him completely, to ensure he could never do this to anyone else. But first, I needed allies. At 7 sharp, I called Tom Bradley, my lawyer for the past 30 years. Tom had handled every real estate deal I'd ever made, every contract, every investment property acquisition. If anyone could untangle this mess legally, it was him. Frank, you sound terrible. Is everything okay? Tom, I need you at my house in an hour. Bring everything you have on my properties and the family trust fund. And Tom? Don't mention this to anyone. especially if David calls. Frank, you're scaring me. You should be scared. I am. While waiting for Tom, I made another call, this one to Jimmy Chen, a private investigator who'd helped me with a tenant issue years back. Jimmy had been a forensic accountant before becoming a PI, perfect for following money trails. Mr. Morrison, what can I do for you? I need you to investigate a company called Desert Rose LLC and a woman named Melissa Summers. I also need you to track some real estate transactions, full surveillance, financial records, the works. Money's no object. When do you need this? Yesterday. Tom arrived looking concerned, his usual pristine suit slightly rumpled from rushing over. I showed him everything, the forged documents, the security footage, the property transfers. His face went from confused to shocked to furious as he reviewed each piece of evidence. Frank, this is massive fraud. Identity theft, forgery, elder abuse. David could go to prison for 20 years. I don't want him in prison, I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. I want him to understand what he's thrown away. I want him to feel what I'm feeling. Prison's too easy. Tom leaned back in his chair, studying me. What did you have in mind? The transfers aren't complete yet. Can we stop them? With this evidence? Absolutely. But Frank, once we file the paperwork, David will know you're onto him. He could run. Not if he doesn't know it's me stopping him. I pulled out the business card Marcus had given me years ago. Judge Harold Fitzgerald, retired. Harry owed me a favor from when I'd renovated his mother's house for free after she'd been scammed by another contractor. I want to file everything under seal, keep it quiet until I'm ready. Tom nodded slowly. It's possible. But what's your endgame here? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Sarah was calling. Dad, I just got off the phone with David. You were right. I told him I wanted to come for your birthday, and he immediately started making excuses. Said you weren't feeling well, that the doctor recommended no visitors, that maybe I should wait until summer. What else? I pushed him, said I was worried about you. He got agitated, said he had everything under control and that I needed to trust him. Then he asked if I'd been in contact with you directly. When I said no, he seemed relieved. Dad, he's definitely planning something. Good work, sweetheart. Keep playing along. Let him think you believe him. After I hung up, Tom was staring at me with something like admiration. You're setting a trap. I'm a builder, Tom. I know that before you can build something new, sometimes you have to demolish what's rotten. But you do it carefully, systematically, so the whole structure doesn't collapse and hurt innocent people. His wife and kids. They don't deserve to suffer for his choices. That's why I need to do this right. Jimmy Chen called that afternoon with his first report. Melissa Summers was David's mistress, had been for 2 years. She was a real estate agent, of course she was, specializing in international properties. Together, they'd been setting up a life in Costa Rica, complete with a beachfront property purchased with money David had been siphoning from his own business. There's more, Mr. Morrison, Jimmy said. Your son's been telling people you have dementia. He's been laying the groundwork for months, telling neighbors and family friends that you've been confused, forgetting things. If you'd tried to report this after he left, no one would have believed you. The cruelty of it took my breath away. My own son had been assassinating my character, destroying my reputation to cover his tracks. The anger that washed over me was different from before. Cold, calculated, the kind I'd only felt once before when a subcontractor had endangered my workers with shoddy materials. That evening, I got another visitor, Patricia, David's wife. She stood at my door, mascara streaked, holding my grandson's hand. Little Tyler, only 6, waved at me with a gap-toothed smile that reminded me painfully of David at that age. Frank, I'm sorry to bother you, but is David here? He hasn't been home in 2 days, and he's not answering his phone. I let them in, my mind racing. Patricia didn't know. Of course she didn't. David had been living a complete double life. I settled Tyler in front of the TV with some juice and cookies, then sat with Patricia in the kitchen. Patricia, there are some things happening that you need to know about, but I need you to stay calm for Tyler's sake. Her face paled. Is he having an affair? Among other things. I showed her just the security footage of David with Melissa, nothing about the theft yet. She needed to process one betrayal at a time. She didn't cry. She just sat there, staring at the frozen image on my phone, her hands perfectly still on the table. "I knew," she whispered. I didn't know, but I knew. The late nights, the secret phone calls, the way he'd been moving money around. He said it was for a big investment opportunity, something that would set us up for life. "Patricia, what money?" "Our savings, the kids' college funds." He said the real estate market was about to boom and we needed to get in early. He said, she laughed bitterly. He said he learned everything from you, that you'd taught him how to spot a perfect investment. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. David wasn't just stealing from me. He was stealing from everyone who trusted him, his children's futures, his wife's security, my legacy for all three of my children. The scope of his greed was staggering. "How much, Patricia?" "Everything. About $300,000, including the mortgage we took out on our house last month." I closed my eyes, feeling every one of my 72 years. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about a man who'd lost his way so completely that he was willing to destroy everyone who loved him. Patricia stayed for dinner. I couldn't let her and Tyler go home to an empty house, not when their world was about to shatter completely. While Tyler played with some of David's old toys I'd kept in the garage, a box of Legos and model cars that now felt like artifacts from a different life, Patricia and I sat at the kitchen table where my family had shared thousands of meals. "Frank, there's something else," Patricia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "David's been asking me to sign papers, lots of papers. He said they were for tax purposes for the investment. But now, what did I sign?" My stomach dropped. "Do you have copies?" He always took them right after, said his lawyer needed the originals immediately. I called Tom Bradley again, asked him to come back despite the late hour. This was spiraling beyond what I'd imagined. When Tom arrived and heard about Patricia's signatures, his face turned grave. "Patricia, I need you to think carefully. Did any of these documents mention property transfers, quitclaim deeds, or power of attorney?" She nodded slowly, her face draining of color. "Power of attorney. He said it was in case something happened to him on his business trips." Oh God, what have I done? Tom and I exchanged glances. With Patricia's power of attorney, David could potentially access her inheritance from her late father, another $500,000 in stocks and bonds she'd been saving for the children's education. "We need to freeze everything tonight," Tom said, already pulling out his laptop. "Every account, every asset. Patricia, I'm going to need you to call your bank right now." As Patricia made frantic calls to financial institutions, I stepped onto the back patio with my phone. The desert evening was cool, the sky painted in purples and oranges. This same patio where David had learned to ride his bike, where he'd asked my advice about proposing to Patricia, where we'd celebrated his promotion at the investment firm just last year. I called Emma at her military base in Germany. It was early morning there, but she answered immediately. "Dad, is everything okay?" "Emma, I need you to check all your accounts, investment, savings, everything. Make sure nothing's been touched." "Dad, you're scaring me. What's going on?" I told her everything. The silence on the other end stretched so long, I thought we'd been disconnected. "I'll kill him," she finally said, her voice ice cold. "I'll get emergency leave and I'll come home and I'll—" "No, Emma, that's not how we handle this. We're going to do this the right way, the smart way." "The smart way? Dad, he stole from you while you were helpless. He's destroying his own children's futures. How can you be calm about this?" "Because anger makes you stupid, and I can't afford to be stupid right now. Your brother's made his choices. Now I have to make mine." After I hung up, Jimmy Chen texted me new information. He'd been surveilling Melissa Summers' apartment and captured photos of David loading boxes into a rental truck. More interesting were the airline reservations Jimmy had uncovered. 2 one-way tickets to Costa Rica, departing in 5 days. David and Melissa traveling as Mr. and Mrs. Richardson. 5 days. That was my timeline. I went back inside to find Patricia, crying quietly while Tyler slept on the couch, exhausted from playing. Tom was on the phone with a judge he knew, getting emergency orders to freeze the assets. "It's done," Tom said, hanging up. "Every account Patricia has access to is frozen. David won't be able to touch them. But Frank, we need to move on your properties too." If those transfers go through, they won't, I said. Tom, I want you to file an emergency injunction tomorrow morning, but I don't want David arrested. Not yet. Patricia looked up at me, confused. Frank, he needs to pay for this. He will. But if we have him arrested now, those tickets to Costa Rica become evidence in a criminal case. The money gets tied up in legal proceedings for years. You and your children get nothing while lawyers fight it out. Is that what you want? She shook her head, fresh tears falling. Then trust me. I've been planning developments for 45 years. I know how to build something that lasts. That night, after Patricia and Tyler were settled in my guest room, I sat in my office with all the pieces laid out before me. Property deeds, bank statements, security footage, photos from Jimmy's surveillance. It was like looking at blueprints for a construction project, seeing how everything connected. I made a decision. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Big Mike Torino. Mike had been a concrete supplier back in the day, but everyone knew his family had connections that went beyond construction. He'd gone legitimate years ago, but he still remembered who'd given him his first major contract when no one else would trust him. Frank Morrison, Mike's gravelly voice boomed through the phone. Heard you were laid up. I'm better now, Mike. I need a favor. The kind where no questions get asked. For you? Anything. I need someone watched. My son David. I need to know every move he makes for the next 5 days. Every meeting, every phone call, every transaction. But he can't know he's being watched. Your boy in trouble? He is the trouble, Mike. There was a pause. That's rough, Frank. Family stuff always is. Consider it done. My guys will be shadows. The next morning brought a flurry of activity. Tom filed the injunctions, keeping everything sealed as requested. Judge Fitzgerald expedited everything, understanding the urgency. The property transfers were frozen just hours before they were set to complete. David called me around noon, his voice casual. Hey, Dad, just checking in. How are you feeling? Better every day, I lied smoothly. Physical therapy is really helping. Great. Listen, I might need to extend my business trip. There's a big opportunity in Scottsdale. Could be huge for the family portfolio. The family portfolio he'd been stealing. The audacity was breathtaking. Whatever you think is best, son. You've been handling everything so well. Thanks, Dad. Oh, and if anyone calls about property documentation, just refer them to me. There have been some scammers targeting elderly property owners lately. Can't be too careful. Elderly, like I was some feeble mark. I'll do that, David. You be careful on your trip. After I hung up, Jimmy arrived with more intelligence. He'd hacked into Melissa's email, something I didn't ask how he'd done, and found correspondence with a Costa Rican real estate attorney. They weren't just planning to flee, they were planning to claim I'd gifted them the properties, that it was all legitimate inheritance advance. They had forged documents to support their story, including a fake diagnosis of dementia from a doctor I'd never seen. Mr. Morrison, Jimmy said, they've thought of everything. If you hadn't caught this when you did. But I did catch it, and now it's my turn to think of everything. That afternoon, I had Mike's guy report that David had met with a banker at a coffee shop, someone from a bank I didn't use. They'd exchanged an envelope. More forgeries, probably, or maybe cash from one of the property deals that had gone through before I caught on. I made another call, this one to Richard Steinberg, who owned the Arizona Republic newspaper. His daughter had bought one of my properties 5 years ago, and I'd helped her when the inspection found problems the seller had hidden. Richard, I might have a story for you, but I need you to hold it until I give the word. What kind of story? The kind that sells papers. Elder fraud, family betrayal, fake companies, international flight. But it has to be handled right, and it can't leak early. You have my word, Frank. When you're ready, we'll be ready. The next 3 days passed in a blur of calculated moves and sleepless nights. Patricia had taken Tyler to stay with her sister in Tucson, unable to face the wreckage of her marriage while trying to protect her son from the truth. I'd given her money for expenses, cash, nothing traceable, and promised to call when it was over. Mike's surveillance team was worth every favor I'd called in. They reported that David had been to 3 different banks, 2 law offices, and had met with Melissa 6 times. More disturbing, he'd been to my house while I was at physical therapy, though he didn't know I'd installed new cameras that uploaded directly to the cloud. The footage showed him in my bedroom, going through my personal papers, photographing documents. He even went through my medicine cabinet, taking pictures of my prescriptions. Building his dementia case, no doubt. The cold calculation of it made my skin crawl. Sarah flew in from Boston on day 3, arriving at my house just after sunset. When I opened the door, she fell into my arms, something she hadn't done since her mother's funeral. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I should have seen this. I should have been here." "Stop that," I said firmly, holding her at arm's length. "This isn't your fault. Your brother made his choices all on his own." We sat in the living room, and I showed her everything. Unlike Patricia, Sarah's reaction was pure rage. She paced the room like a caged animal, her hands clenched into fists. "When Mom was dying," she said, voice shaking, "David held her hand and promised to take care of you. She made us all promise. And this is how he honors her memory?" "Your mother would be heartbroken," I admitted. "But she'd also want us to be smart about this. That's why I need your help." "Anything. I need you to call David. Tell him you're in Phoenix for a work conference, that you want to have dinner tomorrow night. See if he'll come." "He won't. Not if he's leaving for Costa Rica in 2 days." "He will if you tell him you're worried about my mental state. Tell him you've noticed some concerning things in my phone calls. Play into his narrative." Sarah's eyes widened as she understood. "You want him to think I'm buying his dementia story." "I want him confident. Arrogant people make mistakes." That evening, Tom Bradley came by with news that made everything more urgent. "Frank, I've been digging into Desert Rose LLC. It's not just a shell company, it's part of a network. Your son and Melissa have done this before." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" 3 other elderly property owners in the last 18 months. Similar pattern. Family member gains trust, forges documents, properties sold under market value to the same LLC. Total theft, about $4 million. I sank into my chair. My son wasn't just a thief. He was a serial predator, targeting the vulnerable. The other victims? One died before discovering the theft. His children are still trying to untangle the mess. Another's in a nursing home with actual dementia now. The third committed suicide after losing everything. The room went silent. Sarah grabbed my hand, squeezing tight. "That changes everything," I said quietly. "This isn't just about our family anymore." Tom nodded. "The FBI would be very interested in this. Interstate fraud, organized crime, elder abuse crossing state lines. This is federal territory." "Not yet," I said. "If the FBI gets involved now, David rabbits. He disappears into Costa Rica and maybe never faces justice. Those other families never get closure. No, we do this my way first." Mike called with an update. His guys had followed David to a storage unit in Glendale. "Frank, you're going to want to hear this. He's got a whole unit full of documents, artwork, even furniture. My guy got photos through the fence. Some of that stuff looks like it came from your house." I thought about the missing items I'd attributed to my foggy memory during recovery. My father's watch that I couldn't find. The signed baseball from the 2001 World Series. Small things, but meaningful. He'd been robbing me blind in every way possible. "There's something else," Mike continued. "He had a visitor at the storage unit, a man named Carlos Mendez. My sources say Mendez specializes in new identities. Documents that can pass any inspection." So David wasn't planning to stay David Morrison in Costa Rica. He was going to disappear completely, become someone else, leaving behind not just his family, but his very identity. The thoroughness of his betrayal was almost impressive in its scope. Sarah's call to David that night was masterful. I listened on speaker as she played the concerned sister perfectly. "David, I'm really worried about Dad. He called me 3 times yesterday asking about Mom, like he forgot she was gone, and he mentioned something about properties being stolen. He sounded paranoid." "I know," David said, his voice dripping with false concern. "It's been getting worse. That's why I've been handling everything for him. Actually, I'm glad you called. We need to talk about long-term care options." "I'm in Phoenix for a conference. Can we have dinner tomorrow? Maybe discuss this in person?" There was a pause. I could practically hear him calculating, weighing the risk against the opportunity to reinforce his narrative. "Tomorrow's tough. I have meetings all day about Dad's portfolio." Please, David, I'm scared. I need my big brother right now. The manipulation in her voice was perfect. She'd learned well from watching me negotiate over the years. Okay, tomorrow 7 o'clock, Morton's Steakhouse downtown. But Sarah, don't mention this to Dad. It would just upset him. After she hung up, Sarah looked at me with grim satisfaction. He bought it completely. Good. Now here's what we're going to do. I laid out the plan. Every piece, every player, every moment timed to perfection. Sarah would wear a wire, courtesy of Jimmy's surveillance equipment. Tom would have papers ready. Mike's men would be positioned at every exit. And the FBI agent Tom had been in contact with, not officially involved yet, would be having dinner at the next table, unofficially observing. What about the storage unit? Sarah asked. Already handled. Judge Fitzgerald issued a preservation order. Nothing can be removed. It's all evidence now. That night, I couldn't sleep again. But this time it wasn't from anger or hurt. It was anticipation. Tomorrow David would sit down for dinner thinking he was about to convince his sister to help him lock me away. Instead, he'd be walking into a trap 45 years of construction experience had taught me how to build. I stood at my bedroom window, looking out at the Phoenix skyline. Somewhere out there, my son was probably with his mistress, toasting their upcoming escape, counting their stolen money. He'd forgotten the first rule I'd taught him on construction sites. Always check your foundation before you build. His was about to crumble. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma in Germany. Watching your six from across the ocean, Dad. Give him hell. Then another from Patricia. Tyler asked when Uncle David is coming to visit. I didn't know what to say. And finally, one. From an unknown number that I recognized as Mike's burner phone. All pieces in position. Your boy won't see it coming. I thought about my wife, how disappointed she'd be in what David had become. But I also knew she'd understand what I was about to do. She always said I built things to last. Houses, businesses, reputations. Tomorrow, I'd be demolishing one son to save the rest of my family's future. The irony wasn't lost on me. David had spent months building his elaborate scheme to steal my legacy. Tomorrow, I'd show him what a real construction expert could destroy in a single evening. The morning of the dinner, I woke at 4 a.m., my mind already racing through every detail of what was about to unfold. I made coffee in the kitchen where David had eaten breakfast thousands of times, where he'd done homework, where he'd told me about his first girlfriend. Every memory felt tainted now, like looking at family photos and finding a stranger's face where your son should be. Tom Bradley arrived at 7 with a briefcase full of documents. Everything's ready, Frank. The cease and desist orders, the fraud documentation, even the commitment papers David tried to forge for you. Judge Fitzgerald authenticated everything. The FBI? Agent Martinez will be at the restaurant, unofficially, of course. If David says anything incriminating about the interstate fraud, she'll have heard it all. Sarah came downstairs, dressed professionally, but with dark circles under her eyes. She hadn't slept either. Dad, I keep thinking, what if he runs? What if he sees this coming? He won't, I said with more confidence than I felt. Your brother's fatal flaw has always been his arrogance. He thinks he's smarter than everyone else. Tonight, that arrogance is going to destroy him. Jimmy Chen arrived with the surveillance equipment. The wire was state-of-the-art, virtually undetectable. As he helped Sarah put it on, he gave us one last piece of intelligence. Melissa Summers went to the airport this morning. She's on a flight to Costa Rica right now. Looks like she's getting everything ready for David's arrival tomorrow. So David was planning to meet her there after tying up loose ends. After putting me away, the callousness of it, having dinner with his sister while his mistress prepared their new life with stolen money, was breathtaking. I spent the afternoon at the house, pretending everything was normal. I even called David, playing the confused old man he believed I was becoming. David, did you move my reading glasses? I can't find them anywhere. They're probably on your head, Dad, he said, laughing. Check there first. Oh, you're right. Silly me. Your mother always said I'd lose my head if it wasn't attached. Speaking of Mom, Dad, you remember she passed away, right? You've been mentioning her a lot lately like she's still around. The practiced concern in his voice made me sick. Of course I remember. Sometimes I forget she's gone. The house feels so empty. I know, Dad. Listen, we'll talk about some options soon to make sure you're taken care of, okay? Maybe somewhere with more people around. Activities, medical staff nearby. A nursing home. My son was laying groundwork to lock me away while he spent my money in Costa Rica. That sounds nice, David. You've always taken such good care of me. After I hung up, I had to sit down, overwhelmed by the sheer cruelty of it all. This wasn't just theft, it was a complete betrayal of everything family meant. He was willing to let me rot in some facility, confused and alone, while he lived in luxury on my life's work. At 5 o'clock, Sarah left for the restaurant, wanting to arrive early to ensure everything was set up correctly. Mike's men were already in position, one as a valet, another as a busboy, 2 more at the bar. Agent Martinez had a table with clear sightlines to where David and Sarah would be sitting. At 6:30, my phone rang. It was David. Dad, quick question. Did anyone call you today about property documents? I want to make sure you didn't accidentally give out any information. No one called, I lied. Should I be worried? No, just being careful. There are people who might try to take advantage of your condition. My condition, the one he'd invented. You're such a good son, David, looking out for me. Always, Dad. I learned from the best. The hypocrisy was staggering. I learned from the best, while he systematically destroyed everything I'd built, everything I'd tried to teach him about honor, hard work, and family loyalty. Tom arrived at 6:45 to wait with me. We would monitor everything from Sarah's wire from my home office. As 7 o'clock approached, my hands started shaking, not from age or infirmity, but from anticipation mixed with dread. In construction, demolition day was always bittersweet. You were destroying something to build something better, but the destruction itself was violent, final. Sarah's at the table, Tom reported, listening through headphones. David just arrived. I put on my own headphones, and suddenly I could hear everything, the restaurant ambiance, the clink of glasses, and then David's voice. Sarah, you look great. How's Boston treating you? It's fine, Sarah replied. Thanks for meeting me. I know you're busy with the business trip. Family first, always. Besides, we need to talk about Dad. Through the wire, we heard him launch into his performance. Concerned son, burdened by an aging father's decline. He had documents with him, he said. Medical opinions, forged, examples of confusion, manufactured, and a proposal for a wonderful facility in Scottsdale. It has a memory care unit, David explained. Dad would be safe, looked after. The staff specializes in dementia patients. This seems so sudden, Sarah said, her voice perfectly calibrated between concern and uncertainty. Just a few months. Ego, Dad seemed fine. That's how it happens sometimes. Rapid onset, especially after trauma like his surgery. I've been watching him deteriorate for months. Did he tell you about thinking Mom was still alive? He mentioned her a few times. It's getting worse. Last week he accused me of stealing from him, said I was taking his properties. Sarah, he doesn't even remember signing the sale documents. I had to sell those properties to pay for his care. The mortgage on his house, the investment liquidation. It's all for him. The lies flowed so smoothly, so convincingly. If I hadn't had proof of his betrayal, I might have believed him myself. David, Sarah said, and I could hear her voice hardening slightly. Those properties were worth nearly $2 million. Surely Dad's care doesn't cost that much. You don't understand the full picture. Dad made some bad investments before his surgery. He was already showing signs of confusion. I've been cleaning up his messes, trying to salvage what I can for the family. For the family? Or for Melissa Summers? The silence was deafening. Even through the wire, I could feel the atmosphere change. I don't know what you're talking about, David said finally, but his voice had lost its smooth confidence. Costa Rica's nice this time of year, Sarah continued. I hear you've already bought property there. Beachfront, right? Another long pause. Then David's voice, lower, harder. Who have you been talking to? The question is, who have you been stealing from? Just Dad, or is Patricia's father's inheritance gone too? We heard a chair scrape. David was getting up to leave. But Sarah wasn't done. Sit down, David. If you walk out now, the FBI agent 3 tables over is going to become very interested in you. Yes, the woman in the blue dress. She's been listening to every word. Through the wire, we heard David sink back into his chair. "Sarah, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You've been stealing from Dad since his surgery. You've forged documents, created a fake company, and planned to have him declared incompetent. You've stolen from your own wife and children. You're planning to disappear to Costa Rica tomorrow with your mistress. You can't prove any of that. Dad can." The silence stretched. Then David laughed, ugly and bitter. "Dad's a confused old man who doesn't know what day it is. No one's going to believe him over me." That was my cue. I stood up from my desk, my hip protesting, but my determination overriding the pain. Tom helped me to his car, and we drove to Morton's Steakhouse 5 minutes away. Mike's man at the valet stand nodded as we arrived, confirming all exits were covered. I walked into that restaurant with my cane, moving slowly but deliberately, every eye in the place turning to watch. David's face when he saw me was something I'll never forget. Shock, fear, and then a desperate attempt to recover his composure. "Hello, son," I said, my voice carrying across the restaurant with the authority of a man who'd commanded construction sites for 4 decades. David's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Dad? What are you—" "Sarah said you were confused, that you—" Sarah said what I told her to say. I reached the table, standing tall despite the cane. "May I sit?" "We have a lot to discuss." David looked around wildly, probably calculating escape routes, but Mike's men were in position, and Agent Martinez had shifted in her seat to watch more openly. He was trapped, and he knew it. I sat down slowly, deliberately, maintaining eye contact with my son the entire time. The waiter approached, but Tom Bradley waved him off. This wasn't about dinner anymore. "David," I began, pulling out a folder from inside my jacket, "let me tell you what I know. On January 15th, while I was under anesthesia for hip surgery, you forged my signature on documents transferring 2 of my properties to Desert Rose LLC, a shell company you created with Melissa Summers." His face had gone pale. "Dad, you're confused. On January 18th, you accessed my home equity line of credit, again with forged signatures, withdrawing $200,000. On February 3rd, you began the process of transferring the Central Avenue apartment complex, telling my tenants they had to vacate for a demolition that was never planned. I laid out document after document on the table, each one a nail in the coffin of his deception. On February 10th, you met with Carlos Mendez about obtaining fake identities. On February 15th, you convinced your wife to sign power of attorney documents, giving you access to her inheritance." David's hands were shaking now. "You can't prove any of this." "Security footage," I said simply. "Every visit to my office, every forged signature, every meeting with Melissa in my home, in the office where your mother used to help me with the books. Yes, David, I have it all." Sarah pulled out her phone and played a video. David at my desk, practicing my signature over and over, a stack of property documents beside him. The timestamp showed January 16th, the day after my surgery. That's not what it looks like," David stammered. "Then there's this," Tom Bradley said, setting a court order on the table. "An injunction freezing all transfers related to Desert Rose LLC. The properties you tried to steal are safely back in your father's control. The FBI has been notified about the interstate fraud. Oh yes, we know about the others. Mr. Henderson, who killed himself after you stole his properties, his children are very interested in talking to you." David stood up abruptly, his chair falling backward with a crash that silenced the restaurant. "You can't do this to me. I'm your son." "My son?" I stood too, my voice rising. "My son died somewhere along the way, replaced by a stranger who would rob his father blind while he was helpless. My son wouldn't steal from his own children's college funds. My son wouldn't plan to lock me in a nursing home while he lived on a beach in Costa Rica with his mistress." "You don't understand," David said, his voice desperate now. "The market, my investments, I had losses. I needed capital to recover. It was temporary. I was going to pay it all back." "With what money? The 3 other elderly people you robbed? Did you plan to pay them back too?" The restaurant was completely silent now, every diner watching our family drama unfold. Agent Martinez had stood up, ready to intervene if necessary. "I want a lawyer," David said. "You'll need one," Tom Bradley replied. "Elder abuse, fraud, forgery, identity theft, interstate commerce violations. You're looking at 20 years minimum, though I doubt you'll serve that much." David's eyes sparked with hope, misreading the comment. "Dad, please. Think about Patricia, about Tyler and Jessica. They need their father." "They need an honest father," I said, "which is why you're going to make a deal." Everyone looked at me in surprise, including Sarah. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. "You're going to sign over all rights to every property, every asset you've stolen or tried to steal, not just from me, but from all your victims. You're going to liquidate everything you've hidden away. Yes, we know about the offshore accounts too, and return every penny." "And if I don't?" "Then Agent Martinez over there arrests you right now, and you spend the next 2 decades in federal prison while your children grow up knowing their father is a criminal who destroyed multiple families for greed." David sank back into his chair, defeated. "What's the alternative? You sign everything over. You provide full testimony about Melissa Summers and her role in these crimes. She doesn't get to escape to Costa Rica while you take the fall. You serve 5 years, maybe 3 with good behavior. Your children get to visit you, maintain some relationship with their father. Patricia gets all the recovered assets to secure their future, the future you tried to steal. And my trust fund? My inheritance?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What inheritance? What makes you think you deserve a penny from me after this? Your share will be divided between Sarah and Emma. Patricia will get what she needs for the children from the recovered stolen funds, but you get nothing from me. Ever. You can't cut me out. I'm your son." "No," I said quietly. "You are my son. The boy I raised, who I taught to fish at Lake Pleasant, who helped me build the deck at the cabin, who stood by your mother's bedside and promised to take care of this family. That boy is gone. I don't know who you are." David's face crumpled then, the reality finally hitting him. "Dad, please." "There's one more thing," I interrupted. "Richard Steinberg from the Arizona Republic is very interested in this story. Elder fraud is a hot topic. Your name, your face, your crimes. There'll be front-page news tomorrow unless you cooperate fully. Even with cooperation, the story runs, but at least it includes your confession and remorse. Your choice." Tom Bradley placed a stack of documents in front of David. "Sign these now, and Agent Martinez takes you into custody quietly. Refuse, and she arrests you here, in front of everyone, and we prosecute to the fullest extent of the law." David looked around the restaurant, at the watching diners, at Agent Martinez who had moved closer, at Sarah whose face was stone, at me, his father who had discovered his betrayal and orchestrated his downfall. With shaking hands, he picked up the pen. It took 20 minutes for him to sign everything. Each signature was another admission of guilt, another nail in the coffin of the life he'd planned. When he finished, Agent Martinez approached. "David Morrison, you're under arrest for interstate fraud, elder abuse, and identity theft. You have the right to remain silent." As she read him his rights, David looked at me one last time. "I'm sorry, Dad." "No," I said. "You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference." They led him out through the kitchen to avoid making more of a scene. The restaurant slowly returned to normal, diners resuming their conversations, though many kept glancing at our table. Sarah grabbed my hand. "Dad, are you okay?" "No," I admitted. "I'm not. I just destroyed my son's life." "He destroyed his own life," Tom said firmly. "You just held him accountable." "What about Patricia and the kids?" Sarah asked. "They'll be okay. Between the recovered funds and the life insurance policies David didn't know about, they'll be secure. Patricia's strong. She'll rebuild." I stood up, suddenly exhausted. "But not near me. I can't look at those children and see their father's face every day. I'll provide for them, but from a distance." We left the restaurant, Tom and Sarah supporting me as my hip finally gave in to the stress of the day. As we reached the car, my phone buzzed with a text from Mike. "Storage unit secured. Found documents for 6 more victims. Your boy was busier than we thought. 6 more families destroyed by my son's greed. The magnitude of his crimes kept growing, and with it, my shame that I'd raised someone capable of such cruelty." The weeks following David's arrest blurred together like construction seasons I could barely distinguish in memory. The story did run in the Arizona Republic, just as I'd promised. The headline read, Valley Developer's Son Arrested in Multi-Million-Dollar Elder Fraud Scheme. Richard Steinberg had been respectful but thorough, interviewing the other victims, painting a picture of systematic predation that shocked the community. I stopped reading after the first article. Every word felt like another failure on my part as a father. Patricia filed for divorce the day after David's arrest. She came by the house one last time, bringing Tyler and Jessica to say goodbye. Tyler didn't understand why they were moving to California to live with Patricia's sister, why Uncle David wasn't coming with them, why Grandpa looked so sad. "Are you mad at us, Grandpa?" Tyler asked, his 6-year-old eyes wide with confusion. I knelt down, my hips screaming in protest, and hugged him tight. "Never, buddy, never. You remember that Grandpa loves you, always." Jessica, only 4, just waved goodbye, oblivious to the destruction her father had wrought. Patricia and I exchanged a look over their heads, an understanding that while I would provide for them financially, our relationship as family had died with David's betrayal. "The trust fund for their education will be managed by my lawyer," I told her quietly. "They'll want for nothing." "Except a father," Patricia said bitterly. "They have you. That's enough, more than enough." After they left, I stood in my empty house surrounded by the ghosts of better times. Sarah had returned to Boston after taking a week off to help me handle the immediate aftermath. Emma had managed to get emergency leave and would arrive tomorrow. But tonight, I was alone with my thoughts and my guilt. Tom Bradley called with updates on the legal proceedings. "David's cooperating fully," he said. "Melissa Summers was arrested at the San Jose airport. Costa Rica's extraditing her next week. With both of them providing testimony against each other, we're recovering almost everything." "What about the other victims?" "The Henderson family is getting their father's properties back. Mrs. Chen will recover about 70% of what was taken. Mr. Blackwood, well, his dementia is real, but his children will be able to afford proper care now. 70%. Some of these families would never fully recover what my son had stolen." I made a decision. "Tom, I want you to set up a restitution fund. Any shortfall between what's recovered and what was stolen, I'll cover personally." "Frank, that could be hundreds of thousands." "I don't care. My son did this. The least I can do is make it right." The next day, Emma arrived like a whirlwind of military efficiency and barely contained rage. She'd always been the fighter of my 3 children, the one who'd stood up to bullies, who'd joined the Air Force to serve something bigger than herself. "I want to see him," she announced, still in her uniform. "Emma, I need to look him in the eye, Dad. I need to understand how my brother became this monster." So I drove her to the federal detention center, where David was being held pending his formal sentencing. We sat in the visiting room, waiting, and when they brought him in wearing orange, Emma didn't flinch. "Why?" she asked simply. David looked older already, the confident businessman facade stripped away. "Emma, no excuses, no justifications, just tell me why." He was quiet for a long moment. "Because I could," he finally said. "Because I was good at it. Because every successful score made me feel powerful, smart, like I was winning a game." "A game?" Emma's voice was ice. "You destroyed families for a game?" "I didn't think of them as families. They were just opportunities. Assets to acquire." "What about our family? Were we just assets too?" David looked at me then, and for a moment I saw something that might have been genuine remorse. "Dad was supposed to be different. It started small, just borrowing from one property to cover another investment loss. I always meant to pay it back. But then the losses got bigger, and Melissa showed me how easy it was, and I convinced myself Dad would never know, that he'd be taken care of, that I deserved the inheritance early for all the work I'd done." "You convinced yourself he had dementia," Emma said flatly. I started to believe it. It made it easier. If he was losing his mind anyway, what difference did it make?" I finally spoke. "The difference is that I'm sitting here, fully aware that my son betrayed everything I tried to teach him. That's the difference." David broke down then, sobbing like he hadn't since he was a child. But these weren't the tears of a scraped knee that could be kissed better. These were the tears of a man who'd destroyed his own life and was only now understanding the magnitude of what he'd lost. We left without saying goodbye. Over the next months, I threw myself into managing the restitution fund. It gave me purpose, a way to channel my guilt and anger into something constructive. I met with each family my son had wronged, looked them in the eye, and apologized for what he'd done. Some forgave me, others couldn't. I understood both responses. Mrs. Chen, a tiny elderly woman who reminded me of my own grandmother, actually hugged me when I handed her the check that made up for her losses. "You're not responsible for your son's choices," she said in accented English, "but you're choosing to be responsible for making it right. That's honor." The Henderson children were less forgiving. Their father had taken his own life, and no amount of money could bring him back. I didn't ask for their forgiveness. I just gave them what I could, and promised that their father's story would be part of David's sentencing, ensuring he understood the true cost of his crimes. Spring turned to summer. David was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison with possibility of parole in 5. Melissa Summers got 4 years and deportation after. The authorities recovered most of the stolen funds, and my personal contributions covered the rest. Financially, the victims were whole. Emotionally, we were all broken in different ways. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Margaret Foster, who specialized in family trauma. In our sessions, I struggled with the fundamental question: where had I gone wrong? "You assume you went wrong," Dr. Foster said during one session. "But David is an adult who made choices. You didn't teach him to steal. You didn't model this behavior." "But I raised him. I must have missed something, some sign." "Frank, some people choose darkness despite being raised in light. It's not always the parents' fault." I wanted to believe her, but every night I lay awake replaying memories, looking for the moment my son had turned from the path I'd set him on. Sarah visited monthly, bringing her own family. Her kids, teenagers now, didn't fully understand why they couldn't see Uncle David anymore, but they adapted. Sarah was fierce in her protection of me, refusing to let me wallow. "Dad, you saved those families. You stopped him. That counts for something." Does it? Or did I just clean up a mess I should have prevented? You can't prevent what you don't see coming, and David was very good at hiding who he really was. By fall, I'd made a decision about my properties. I kept my house and one rental for income, but the rest I put into a trust. Not for my family, that wealth felt tainted now, but for a foundation supporting elder abuse prevention. The Frank Morrison Foundation would educate seniors about fraud, provide legal resources for victims, and lobby for stronger protections. "You're turning pain into purpose," Dr. Foster observed. "That's healthy." "It's necessary," I corrected. "If one family avoids what mine went through because of this foundation, then maybe something good comes from this disaster." Patricia reached out at Christmas, sending a photo of the kids with Santa. Tyler had grown taller, Jessica was losing her baby teeth. They looked happy, adjusting to their new life in California. Patricia's note was brief. "They ask about you sometimes. I tell them you love them, but you're sick. Someday, I'll tell them the truth. Not today." I sent gifts through Tom Bradley, maintaining the distance I knew was necessary. Those children deserved a fresh start, free from the shadow of their father's crimes and their grandfather's shame. On a cold January morning, exactly 1 year after the surgery that had started it all, I stood in my office looking at the family photos still hanging on the wall. David's college graduation, his wedding, him holding Tyler as a newborn. I'd thought about taking them down a dozen times, but couldn't bring myself to do it, because here's the truth I'd come to understand. The son in those photos, the one I'd loved and raised, he was real. He'd existed. Somewhere along the way, greed and opportunity had corrupted him, turned him into someone I didn't recognize. But erasing the evidence of who he'd been wouldn't change who he'd become. Emma called from Germany that afternoon. "Dad, I need to tell you something. I've been visiting David." My heart stopped. "What?" I needed to understand. And I think he needs to understand too. He's broken, Dad. Really broken. The man he was, the criminal, that's gone. What's left is just empty. Why are you telling me this? Because someday, maybe not soon, but someday you might want to see him again. And if that day comes, I want you to know he's not the same person who tried to destroy you. He's still the person who did destroy us, Emma. I know, but people can change, Dad. You taught us that. Remember when you hired Big Mike despite his family's reputation? You said everyone deserved a chance to be better than their worst moment. This wasn't a moment, Emma. This was calculated, systematic. I know. I'm not saying forgive him. I'm just saying, don't close the door forever. For your own sake, not his. After we hung up, I sat in my office until the sun set, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and purple. My hip ached. It always did now when I sat too long. But the pain reminded me I was still here, still standing despite everything. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Kids want to FaceTime with Grandpa. You up for it?" I smiled, the first genuine smile in months. "Always," I texted back, "because that's what you do. You rebuild. You take the rubble of what was destroyed and you create something new. Maybe not better, definitely different, but something that can stand." My name is Frank Morrison. I'm 73 years old now, and I've learned that the hardest construction project isn't building something from nothing. It's rebuilding after someone you love has torn everything down. But I'm still here, still building, one day at a time. The Frank Morrison Foundation has helped 47 families in its first year. Emma calls weekly. Sarah visits monthly. Patricia sends pictures of the kids every holiday. And David serves his time, becoming someone I don't know, might never know again. I built my legacy twice, once in properties and wealth, which my son tried to steal, and again in the foundation that helps others avoid our fate. The second legacy, born from betrayal and pain, might be the one that truly lasts. Some nights I still dream about the son I thought I had, the one who helped me build that deck at the cabin, who promised his dying mother he'd take care of me. I wake from those dreams with tears on my face, mourning a boy who might never have really existed. But then morning comes, and there's work to do, families to help, a foundation to run. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't end you unless you let it. It changes you, breaks you, reshapes you, but it doesn't have to define you. I'm not just the father who was betrayed by his son. I'm the man who caught him, stopped him, and made restitution. I'm the man who turned personal tragedy into public service. I'm Frank Morrison, and this is my story. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of the story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.